Well, TVNZ recently did an in-depth report by Indira Stewart on child prostitution. They call it sex workers, but we'll call it what it is, prostitution, because work should never involve sexual exploitation and violence, which prostitution does, and I'll come back to that. But let's have a look at the documentary. I mean, it's great that the issue is seeing the light of day, rather than the shady, murky dark of Hunter's Corner in South Auckland, or South Mall in Manaroa, or many other places. But there's a number of issues that need to be called out and also clarified. Let's check it out. So according to the written report on the One News website, it says it's more than 20 years since the government set up a 5-year action plan to address the sexual and commercial exploitation of children in New Zealand. But as Indira Stewart meets teenage sex workers who entered the industry as children, she asks who monitored that plan and what did it achieve. They spoke to 13 adults, well, prostitutes, and 12 of them told TVNZ they'd started working the streets between the age of 13 and 15. The most common point into the industry, it seemed, was childhood. Now, look, credit to Indira Stewart for doing this report, but the problem for TVNZ is that we've already published a thorough, in-depth report on this issue back in 2021. Is it working? An evidence-based review of the decriminalization of prostitution in New Zealand highlighted several significant concerns. It challenged the assumption that the decriminalization of prostitution has been a success, and it found the benefits of the Prostitution Reform Act 2003 have been exaggerated, its shortcomings ignored, denied, or hidden. And the report found the following: increased numbers of prostitutes, health and safety violations and the reality of violence, street workers experiencing 2 to 3 times more violence than other workers, low rates of reporting and prosecuting violations, the black market is still here, and there's a lack of support for exiting the industry, and there's been a failure to implement recommended changes. So will TVNZ's documentary reinforce these findings? Well, let's have a watch. I've got a few excerpts to show you, and you'll note that while the focus is on when someone starts prostituting themselves, the environment and the negative outcomes don't change as they get older, even if they started at an older age. But we're not surprised at that, are we? It's the nature of the awful industry. And the opening from the presenter sums this exact point up.
We started filming this story back in 2021, but the issue of children being used for sex work in Aotearoa has been around for much longer. We've decided not to identify any sex worker of any age, even if they consented to being identified, to protect their privacy, safety and well-being. And I just want to warn you, this story features sexual themes, child abuse and drugs, so it could be distressing.
Yeah, note the admission right from the start. They're not identifying anyone, even if the person is happy to be identified, because TVNZ rightly wants to protect their safety and well-being. But just within that statement is a tacit admission that this is a dangerous industry which deserves all the stigma it gets, and we should do everything within our power to shut it down, not make it safer, which is of course a dangerous lie. But then a disturbing fact. Yep, exactly right. As we say in our report, the New Zealand Prostitutes Collective, which is basically an activist group, has failed to collect accurate data on the number of people involved in prostitution, despite being contracted by the government to do so.
I started at 10-7 myself. I started street work when I was 13. But I was selling myself prior to that. I was sending nudes to everyone. But the only part about it is that I only started getting money when I was 12, 13. I started working the streets. I just loved people, and the drugs is what kept me calm. It was like I was free. I was just sick of getting abused. I thought that it was just time for me to be free.
Yeah, note that survey, 2001, that was before the law was liberalised. And the big problem is that the New Zealand Prostitutes Collective does not provide support for those wishing to exit. It has no official contact with the black market of prostitution, and it plays down the industry-wide realities of violence and exploitation, denying the existence of underage abuse and internal trafficking, rejecting the voices of exited women, ex-prostitutes, and it amplifies the voice of pimps. Now, the reporter asks the prostitute the question, did you feel safe? The answer is the same that any prostitute would give you.
When you were out there and you were 13, did any clients ever ask your age?
Yes, and I will say, well, I'm 18. Yeah. I've been 18 for like 6 years. Some guys, they don't pay money. Some guys, they like just tell you to get out.
Did you feel safe on the streets?
No, I didn't. But most of the time, I would just be so high off my face. I was always with some, drag queens. They would tell me get off the streets. They would tell me go home. They would say, oh, you're too pretty to be working on the streets. I'm not proud of the things that I do. I try my best every day, but it seems like I feel like I'm not enough for the world.
Yeah, getting advice from drag queens, not the greatest source of wisdom, eh? But what is concerning is that TVNZ can easily find the underage prostitutes who are being exploited, sexually abused, possibly physically abused, but the police and Oranga Tamariki can't or won't. You see, this is sexual abuse, this is likely sexual violence, this is child abuse, yet as we will soon see, the police and Oranga Tamariki are turning a blind eye. Let's continue.
We're here at a kind of a local car park area, which is known as a hotspot for where young people, especially those under 18, frequently meet for sex work. We've seen a lot of this tonight where we've got young girls in the car, often with what it looks like older adult males. We first began filming the story back in 2021, and back then we met several teenagers who were out here doing street-based sex work and who also told us they were still attending high school, the local high schools in this area, by day. It's a hard kind of reality to watch happening in our society.
It is so sad. Why aren't we doing everything to stop this? But even worse is that TVNZ then unfortunately goes to the apologists for this industry, the Prostitutes Collective, who seem concerned about rangatahi, but has no solutions. It's just about the law. Although interestingly, as you'll hear, she explains the Nordic model of the prostitution law, the one where the buyer is prosecuted so as to stop demand. That's the one we've been lobbying for. But that should be used not only for underage, but for all exploited and vulnerable women.
When I think about some of the rangatahi I've encountered over the years, I'll talk to them about what the law means in context of them being a minor. It's not illegal to be a underage sex worker. It is only illegal if someone is facilitating or buying sex off the young person.
This is Anna on one of her regular street outreaches. The law is designed to protect kids from being exploited. It's only the adult who pays for or receives sex services from a child under 18 who's committing a crime.
You see what they're saying? Despite this being sexual abuse, sexual violence, and for underage, child abuse as well, the Prostitutes Collective only want to explain the legal status. It's not illegal. But the myth that a law that allows sexual exploitation of any woman is somehow designed to protect kids from being exploited is just silly. Just the kids? Why not all vulnerable women and even some men on the street? But the Prostitutes Collective doesn't seem to be reporting this to the authorities. And they're certainly not helping people out of the industry. No, it's about safety and health. And I have a bridge to sell you. Apparently, they're mainly just interested in the transgender ones as well, which of course is another major red flag. The state is happy to facilitate kids to change their sex, criminalise anyone who tries to help this vulnerable child, and then turn a blind eye if they're being sexually exploited and damaged on the street. Truly shocking.
When I know that a young person is probably like 14 or 15, and if they are transgender, I'll always ask them, like, what's going on? I mean, are they going to school? Do their parents know they're out here?
Yeah, this is not going well, eh? It's risky. Who can you trust? Sounds like a wonderful, affirming industry to be in. Well, no, not at all. Not for anyone.
So I don't really trust a lot of people. One, because, it's risky, and, who can you trust?
Yeah, but they can't connect the dots, can they? The industry to the risk and why we should do everything we can to shut it down.
I always sort of think, well, not one young person should be out on the street, because how have we as society, as a whole, like, what aren't we doing right? But yeah, there isn't an easy solution.
No, contraire actually, Anna. There is an easy solution. Criminalise prostitution, criminalise pimps, criminalise brothels. There is no redeeming factor. And at the same time, I think we should defund the Prostitutes Collective. But note the admission that the law is ineffective, but also the inactivity of the government agencies right from the beginning of the 2000s.
Government agencies have tried to tackle this in the past. In 2001, they launched a 5-year action plan called Protecting Our Innocence. And when sex work for adults became fully legal in Aotearoa, the Crimes Act was changed so that anyone under 18 who was involved in sex work couldn't be criminally charged or convicted. But did the law go far enough to protect them?
We can do better, yeah, but I don't know how we do that, yeah. Aside from our own expertise in this area where rangatahi are not criminalised, for doing their job.
For doing their job. Rangatahi doing their job and talking about their expertise, please. Now, they then go on to hear the voice of the prostitutes themselves. One of them, this is a overage one, but living at a laundromat.
It's hard to get out of this sort of job, you know what I mean? Like, when you're so used to, like, just coming to the streets and all that. Most of the working girls out here, this is our way of making a living. It's fast, easy money.
Where are you staying at the moment?
At the laundromat.
Yeah, and then the admission that the last time they looked at this issue was 2008. 2008. And as our report reveals, as a result of that investigation in 2008, They did very little, very little. Yeah. And now we have online websites connecting underage prostitutes to people who want to exploit them.
I found out about this thing called OnlyFans where you could make money, and old men would just like message me all the time. Heaps of old men would want to like talk to me and like, you know, give me money and all of that, and I just felt like really I just felt, oh gosh, I feel like a bad bitch. Like, I'm making money. I always cover my face, or it will be like subscribe to see my face just to make more money. Guys, like specifically young girls.
Platforms like OnlyFans are strictly 18, but they've been investigated for featuring suspected child sex abuse. This year, OnlyFans was fined after giving incorrect information about how it checked the ages of its users.
Yeah, now look, here's a really interesting thing. Last week, it was announced that Pornhub plans to enhance age checks in the UK, complying with the Online Safety Act in the UK, which requires adult sites to introduce robust age checking techniques. Photo ID, running credit card checks before users can view sexually explicit material. And Ofcom, which is the group that oversees it, but like our censorship board, said society has long protected youngsters from products that aren't suitable for them, from alcohol to smoking or gambling. For too long, children have been only a click away from harmful pornography online. And in fact, just over the weekend, it was reported that the US Supreme Court has ruled that a Texas law requiring that pornography websites verify the age of their visitors was constitutional. All part of the global debate about how to prevent minors from accessing adult material online. Meanwhile, New Zealand sleeps at the wheel, while more and more vulnerable girls become victims of the porn industry, which is targeting them. Now, just one more clip. This is pretty distressing, but it shows why even TVNZ couldn't get appropriate data and even responses. And I'll read it just for those who are listening to this as an audio only. The Ministry of Justice says it's not currently involved in any targeted work that addresses sex work. It monitors relevant laws covering online harm, child pornography, child exploitation, and provides advice to government agencies. Police didn't provide a response to the questions. Oranga Tamariki says it takes concerns seriously and works with police to investigate reports of concern. But remember what the police said. It also says it develops safety plans and provides access to support. It says this can be challenging as rangatahi may not believe they are victims of exploitation. But they couldn't provide any data on how many children in care are involved in prostitution. Yeah, says it all. A government report on prostitution after decriminalisation, listen to this, found that street workers experience 2 to 3 times more violence than other workers. And actual serious violence, rape, holding against will, physical violence, are reported less than 20% of the time. Now here's the question, what other business or sector of society in New Zealand would tolerate this? And yet the sex industry is sold as a success story. Where is OSH? Occupational Safety and Health. No other work employment sector has a risk factor where rape is considered an inherent part of the work. And why would we want a family member to be in a type of work where there is a 35% chance of being sexually molested? As our report said, the normalisation of prostitution leads to a bizarre and dangerous situation, whereby as soon as an underage prostitute turns 18, he's no longer considered to be a victim of abuse, but instead is an empowered worker. There's no acknowledgement of the continued abuse and exploitation. In fact, there was a report in 2021 by ECPAT entitled Speaking for Ourselves, and it provided a platform for underage people in the prostitution to talk about their experiences, and the 13 young people interviewed for the report had histories of family violence, sexual abuse and neglect, as well as violence, rape, drug or alcohol misuse while working in the industry. A more recent report describes Auckland children selling their bodies from the age of 12 and charging extra to allow themselves to be strangled or choked while having sex. Now, according to the committee which reviewed the law back in 2008, they said all measures should be taken to divert underage people from entering the sex industry as a means of survival. But despite the existence and obvious harms of underage prostitution, they made the following comments, demonstrating that the nature of underage prostitution as a form of abuse is not fully acknowledged and that these children are not being adequately supported. They said, quote, "The committee does not consider the Prostitution Reform Act, so the liberalisation of prostitution, has made prostitution an attractive occupation for young people. The number of young people in crisis or lacking other means of support who become involved in prostitution to survive is outweighed by those young people in similar situations who do not." There's not a lot of logic in this statement, is there? The committee considers helping vulnerable young people access benefits, accommodation, and other support should be predicated on the need of the young person, not whether they are involved in or at the risk of involvement in prostitution. Now, that's a shocking statement. The recommendation to fund support of at-risk youth made in the review of the law in 2008 has been ignored. That is shocking as well. By the way, you might remember the Prostitutes Collective mentioning transgender prostitutes. And there was actually an article, Radio New Zealand had a report recently, 1 in 5 trans and non-binary people threatened with physical violence. So it's about, 20%. According to the source report, 16% have been prostitutes. Connect the dots. You see, decriminalisation has failed to achieve its stated objectives of improving the safety, health and welfare of the conditions of the workers, all workers. You know what it's done though? It's greatly improved the conditions for pimps and brothel owners. Prostitution is harmful to workers and communities, and the association of prostitution with gang and criminal behaviour, alcohol and drug abuse and sexual abuse and violence means that we are sentencing more and more vulnerable people and even children to an unacceptable situation. How can we be serious about reducing sexual violence against women and girls when the state legitimises the sexual abuse and exploitation of vulnerable people? There is a healthy stigma against prostitution, and for good reason. Credit to Indira Stewart. TVNZ has helped shine the light on this insidious industry. But sadly, our politicians are too weak and cowardly to do anything about it. And don't forget to read our report. It's on our website. You'll see just how bad this law is.